He looks very relaxed with the coffee in his.
Good morning. I'm Roger Solway, Economic Development Coordinator for the town of North Branford. Today we've invited our speakers for the day to give us some leads and suggestions on work that they've been carrying out in this region in solarizing various town properties and residential and business properties. So I'd like to introduce our speakers today. First, let me introduce Bob Wall.
Thank you, Roger. My name is Bob Wall. I'm the Community Outreach Manager with Smart Power, which is a nonprofit marketing organization dedicated to promoting energy efficiency and renewable energy. This program, Solarize North Branford, is funded by a grant from the U.S. Department of Energy, and the team is led by Yale and Duke universities, along with Smart Power, Connecticut Green Bank, and others. Okay. And the purpose of the study, there are a number of electrical circuits within our state that are highly congested, particularly on those hot days of summer. And the study will look into whether by adding solar into those circuits, we can avoid the need for expensive utility infrastructure upgrades. So North Branford is one of 8 circuits that have been chosen for this study. And this particular circuit, I'll show you a map in a second, includes predominantly commercial properties, but also some residential. So here is a map of the North Branford circuit, and I'll be the first to admit that nobody probably has any idea of what circuit they are in, but this is the circuit that ties into a substation along the grid. And the good news is that even if your business or home is outside of the circuit, the installer, CTEC Solar, has graciously offered to provide the same outstanding discounts to you if you're interested in going solar. So just a little background on Solarize. This was brought to Connecticut by the Connecticut Green Bank and Smart Power back in 2012. Nearly 100 towns have done one or more campaigns. And historically, those towns have experienced a huge surge in solar adoption. In the early years, it was common that every town would double the amount of solar within 20 weeks as compared to the previous 7 years. And what's incredible about this campaign is for the first time, Solarize is being offered to commercial properties, not just residential. There are a lot of great reasons for somebody to go solar. Particularly, you will save money on your utility bill and hedge against future rate increases. It's a fantastic return on investment, and because of the financing tools that are available, you can even go solar for no money down, and we'll provide some information on some of the financing, and Jeff will go into that in greater detail. But I just here's a historical map. You can see all the years when solar began in Connecticut in the early 2000s. It was relatively flat, but when Solarize came to town, you can see the huge spike. We like to call it the hockey stick effect. And here are some other energy opportunities I just wanted to mention. The first is Energize Connecticut. It's a one-stop shop for solutions for your business or home. It provides technical assistance, programs, incentives, and financing opportunities. And second, CPACE is a tool that is available throughout Connecticut, and Greenworks Lending is the nation's leading CPACE financing company. I do have some literature which I will leave with Roger for businesses that are interested in learning more about CPACE, but it's a great way that you can do not just solar, but a wide range of energy improvements on your building for no money down at low rates and a payback over a long term. So that's all I have, and I'd like to turn it over to Jeff Pipeling of CTEC Solar.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jeff Pipeling. I'm the Director of Business Development for CTEC Solar. I've been with CTEC Solar since inception. We started in around 2011, coincidentally right around when the Solarize program started as well. We are a local Connecticut company with Connecticut employees, and we service Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and New York. So a little about us. We were founded in 2011. The big thing about us is we work with commercial, municipal, and residential. So we have a residential division and a commercial division. We work with municipalities on installing solar for their schools, their landfills, businesses, small and large. We're very successful at understanding and navigating the programs in Connecticut and making sure that we lay out what the different options are for businesses. Our expertise does include the knowledge of brownfield management and solar development. So one of the things about CTEC is we've done this before. We've solarized over 22 towns over the last 7 years. And what Bob had mentioned, this is a very unique program as commercial accounts are now being invited into the Solarize program. So we do offer all different types of ways to go solar. You can purchase solar, you can finance solar, or you can do what's called a power purchase agreement, which I'll go into detail in a little bit. So just to explain a little bit about the residential, we are residential experts. We've done thousands of residential projects in Connecticut, in the UI territory and Eversource territory. We're experts at multifamily homes, which not a lot of solar companies do, as well as residential homes, whether it's multiple roofs, ground mounts, roof mounts, and anything between. Just to explain quickly what the incentives are for the residential program. So in Connecticut, there is an upfront incentive for residential customers. What that is, right now, the first 10,000 watts of installation is calculated at 46 cents per watt installed. Looks a little confusing, but our reps could explain this to you. The best way to look at it is a 10,000 watt system would get about $4,630 in credit or upfront incentive from the Connecticut Green Bank. And then if you go over 10 kW, the next 10,000 watts is worth $4,000. So in total, a 20,000 watt system could get approximately $8,600 in incentive to help offset the cost of the solar system. If you lease the system and you don't want to own the system, and this is great for people who don't have a tax liability, retirees that maybe don't have much taxes from investments and things. If you can't use the federal tax credit, you can still do solar. And what that is you lease the solar panels for a amount that's less than what you're spending on the electric bill. In UI, the rates are the highest in the state. The residential rates are around 23 to 27 cents per kilowatt hour, and the lease payment might be 15 to 18 cents. So it's a huge savings, especially for retirees to do the lease, or people that aren't working or disabled or things like that. And there is an incentive from the Connecticut Green Bank as well for the lease program. That money does not go back to the homeowner, that goes to the company who's actually owning the system. So there is an incentive for these companies to actually offer the low lease rates. The federal tax credit is something that's available if you purchase the system, purchase or finance. So as long as you're purchasing the system, you get a 30% federal tax credit, and that is actually going down at the end of 2019. So they are going to phase that out. The 30% federal tax credit is extended through 2022. However, it's going to go down in 4% increments starting in 2020. So if it's something where you want to maximize the amount of the federal tax credit, it's definitely advisable to try to get it installed by the end of this year to get the full 30%. If you go into 2020, you still get a tax credit, but it would be 26%. And the HES energy audit, which is basically an energy audit that can be done by any energy audit company in the state of Connecticut. If there's low income folks who can't afford the energy audit, that can be done for free, like a weatherization program. But the Green Bank does want people to be efficient, not just put up solar panels, but also see where they can save electricity. So that's why they require that energy audit first, to see if maybe there's any other ways that they could save money and maybe put up less solar panels if they don't need them all. And that's the residential program in a nutshell. So the commercial program, The picture at the top of the page is actually our building in Bloomfield. So C-Tech Solar not only installs solar, develops solar, we actually have solar, so we practice what we preach. What we tell all commercial customers is we have a nice, easy stairs that goes right up to the roof. So we had actually even Dick Blumenthal came out to our office and walked the array. And we do that mainly because if people want to see how it's attached, how the system looks on the roof, what the parts and pieces are, how far are the panels spaced. We can actually walk you right through our own office. You can come right up and we'll take a look at a megawatt system that's actually live and working. If you look below, the one on the right is a municipal building, very similar to many municipal buildings around the state, where maybe the roof lines aren't all perfectly flat and straight, have some dormers, but we figure out ways to design systems where we can still get the benefit on a municipal building.
What percentage of your usage does that solar system make up?
The one at our system?
Yeah.
That actually covers about 60%. And the main reason is that we are sharing a building with a furniture manufacturer. So they use almost 2 million kilowatt hours. So that system up there produces about 1.3 million kilowatt hours. And we are experts at solar farms. So one of the things about solar is you can either put solar behind the meter, which is where there's a bill, on-site load, and the municipality would save money basically by having the solar directly offset the bill. Or there's what's called virtual net metering, which we're very experienced with. We actually have a solar farm in Thompson, Connecticut. This is the first stage that's selling power to the city of West Hartford virtually. That's something that the city of North Branford could look into. Currently, there's a virtual net metering cap, but that might be lifted. And that means that, for instance, if there's a landfill, okay, very common use for that. We're doing this in other towns as well. Currently, we're about to install in the Putnam landfill. And the town not only gets a benefit of a lease payment, so income, but then they also get to take that power and spread it out to up to 10 accounts. So what we did for West Hartford's very far from Thompson, Connecticut. So there isn't some big wire or conduit running all the way across the state. And the reason it's called virtual net metering is the power from the system in Thompson goes back into the grid, and then Eversource accounts for where that power is going to go as credits. And they will credit up to 10 accounts of a municipality. And we've got another system, another second stage to this one that's actually selling to the city of Hartford.
Why isn't Thompson using it to offset their own bills?
It's a great question. We offered it to Thompson. So there's a difference between offsetting your kilowatt hour rates when you're behind the meter versus a virtual net metering program, which is not offsetting kilowatt hour rates. It's an actual dollar amount. So the best way to describe it is with virtual net metering, you're not actually getting kilowatt hours, you're getting a dollar amount credit at a discount. So if you spend $1 for the power, let's just say, you're getting about $1.25 credit on your bills. Some towns have a hard time grasping that, to be quite honest with you. So we tried to work with Thompson to let them understand that. We typically try to sell the virtual net metering credits to the local municipality, but if the local municipality can't get around it and understand it, unfortunately we have to go elsewhere. But the city of Hartford was more than happy to take that power and savings because the city of Hartford really needs the savings. So to talk about commercial solar incentives, and this is in a nutshell, I'm going to go over kind of what is available. Obviously the federal income tax credit is something that's there, and that's 30% of the gross system cost until the end of 2020. At 2020, it goes down to 26%. However, that's a full 30% off the cost of what's being spent. On top of that, there's another value to commercial businesses, which most commercial businesses use accelerated and bonus depreciation for many different capital expenditures, okay? And the same thing happens here. So you can actually depreciate the value of the system over 6 years or 5 years, whatever your accountant works out for you, but that can be up to another 15% off. So you're talking about a system of a gross cost of a certain amount, 30% off for federal tax credit, another 15% off over time for the depreciation. So almost half the system cost is already covered by tax credits and depreciation credits. Then we have the zero emission renewable energy credits. And this is what UI is required by the state. The state actually sets a renewable portfolio standard is what it's called. And what happens is the utilities are required to have a certain percentage of their portfolio as renewable energy. Now, it's a lot easier for them to go ahead and purchase these credits from private businesses, municipalities, homeowners, instead of going ahead and building all this solar themselves. So what they do is they put a value on a renewable energy credit. Now, one renewable energy credit is worth 1,000 kilowatt hours per year. So if you have 100,000 kilowatt hours that you're producing in a year, that's 100 credits. And the value of those credits is all dependent on if you're in a small, medium, or large tier. And this has to do with the actual size of the system. And not to get into too much detail, but the system size is not the amount of panels on the roof, it's actually the inverter size or the inverter capacity. So if the inverter capacity is 0 to 100 kW, that would be a small ZREC. 100 to 250 would be a medium ZREC, and 250 to 1 megawatt is a large ZREC. And this income is actually 15 years locked in once you get that. So not only are you getting the full tax credit up front, depreciation credit, and then you're getting 15 years of renewable energy credit income, which is paid in the form of a check quarterly by UI. So I did make this worksheet. I think what we'll do is we'll save this to the end just to go over it. But essentially what it is a simple way to calculate, what your actual savings would be, and what ZREC you land in, and how much that would be as well. Quickly, just to kind of put some numbers to it, the ZREC value, I'm not sure if you can see that up on the screen, but the ZREC value in UI right now is $99.37 per one renewable energy credit, which is 1,000 kilowatt hours. The 100 to 250, which is the medium ZREC, that's a little different. You have to bid into it, but about the average price right now is $90. And then the 250 to 1 megawatt goes down. Those are bigger systems, and that value is about $60. And why is that value a little lower? It's just more competitive. So those type of systems are a lot bigger. There's a lot more competition to get that actual renewable energy credit. So the other thing that I want to talk about is net metering. Right now there was a bill last year that went into effect called SB 9 that effectively ended net metering, okay? So right now, this is the last year that you can get into net metering. So as I mentioned, the tax credit's going down, but also net metering is going away. Now, net metering is important. If you're overproducing power and you're producing too much power in a month, which could happen with homeowners or businesses because you're trying to design a system to offset your overall usage for the year. That means that sometimes the sun is going to be shining and producing much more power than you need, and sometimes the sun is not shining and you're producing less power than you need. So how do you offset that? It's called net metering. So the best way to describe it is if you produce 12,000 kilowatt hours in a month, but you only use 10,000 kilowatt hours in a month, that means that you have a 2,000 kilowatt hour credit. And right now they net that every month. So the following month, if you have 2,000 in credit, you would start off the month with negative 2,000 kilowatt hours. And again, that would happen each month until eventually you run out of credits, and then you're paying the utility again. The whole idea with sizing solar, businesses or municipalities or even residences is we try to take a full year of usage, design a system that meets that usage, and then some months you'll be overproducing, but that overproduction will be applied to the months when you're underproducing. And that's what net metering is. It's essentially a free bank on the grid, and the power doesn't just sit there. UI is selling it at full rate to your neighbors. So they're getting their value back, but by selling it at full rate to their neighbors, what's nice about that is that they don't have to purchase high cost electricity from a diesel generator or from Dominion or from out of the state. They can actually use the solar generation that you're not using and push it off to other users, and that actually saves the utility money. Whether they like to admit that or not, it does, so.
So it ended because, so now they don't have to buy your power from you. They don't have to buy they just take your energy without reimbursing you.
They haven't figured out the next program. So what the state wants to do is, what the utilities want to do is do away with the ZREC, the Zero Renewable Energy Credit, and also do away with net metering and come up with a new program called a tariff program. And the tariff program is designed to basically just value the power that you're sending to them on a dollar amount, but not give you kilowatt hours to keep pushing off from month to month. So they want to do it differently. So right now, though, if you do get in by the end of the year, you do have 20 years of net metering grandfathered in. After that, then it will go to the new tariff program, which will be no ZRECs, and we don't know what the value of that tariff is yet. But essentially, looking at other states, when they go to the tariff program, it's never as lucrative as it was previously with net metering and the ZREC. So right now, for businesses that want to maximize their value, it'd be good to get in while the net metering is still available and the ZREC is still available. Correct.
In the last slide, you have the wind and the solar. Is the wind anywhere near as, I guess, efficient or preferable? Or I mean, is the wind just in certain spots of the world, I see the wind is a big thing, the wind turbines, but I don't know, is it around here at all in any significance or not?
Yes, so in the northwest part of the state, there's actually a lot of windmills. I think it depends on if there's wind blowing, but also local communities. So some local communities don't want to see windmills all over the place, and so it's a siting issue. However, there was just a large procurement from Department of Energy and Environmental Protection for the it was a zero carbon bid, where large projects went into bid, and a couple of them won. So there's going to be some 400 megawatt gigantic wind farms that are going to be put out in the ocean that are going to service Connecticut. I think wind is probably not viable in people's backyards to put up a huge windmill where there's going to be environmental issues. There's going to be a lot of people complaining about the birds maybe getting hurt from it. But wind power is viable. And there is what I would say a deep incentive for it. A little different than solar, but us in renewables, we believe all renewables are valuable. Solar is not the only way to go. Solar, wind, hydro, anything renewable, we feel, whatever can take fossil fuels off of the grid is very important. And solar is definitely a big part of that. Wind, I think, I know of one windmill that's actually in New Haven that services a printing shop. And I know the owner there very well, and they do pretty well, but he wants to add solar because it's not covering all his usage. So, and the other part with wind is it can be a lot of operation and maintenance expense, but over time, it's obviously working. You see them all over New York, all over Canada. But in Connecticut, it's a matter of a siting issue right now.
And how about the hydro? Any traction on hydropower at all?
I know that there's definitely a hydro plant that's going to be going online in Connecticut. That's another Connecticut Department of Environmental and Energy Protection bid that had gone out. So there are certain locations that are good for that. Obviously, you have to have the right location where the water is flowing and you're able to convert that energy through turbines. Correct. So there is a bigger overall plan from the Department of Environmental and Energy Protection to try to encompass all different types of renewable energy. Yes, I think that it's important all over the world to do all different types for sure.
Now, is there any money towards the other two, or just solely solar strictly? The state gives you money on so.
The other two, so right now hydro and wind are not part of the ZREC program, but they do have the bigger procurements from DEEP that they can do. But I'm not sure if a business can get an incentive for wind, but it would really offset their electric bill. So there's definitely ways to do that.
Thank you.
So why now with the Value of Solar campaign? CTEC Solar was chosen in a competitive bidding process, so we did have to go through an RFP and put together all our pricing, and Smart Power went through and picked us as being the most competitive. There's a special utility grid improvement benefit. What we feel is that Since the utility is showing us where these locations are that they need solar, that would mean that those locations are underserved. Now, what that means is that if they're underserved, that means there's not a lot of solar on those areas already. So if there's not solar on those areas already, that means that the infrastructure has not been overwhelmed yet. So typically, the utility grid improvement would have a lower cost of interconnecting in these areas that don't already have solar. Group buying power is lower material prices. We're doing this in many towns all over the state, all determined by the Yale research study that showed where the circuits are in need. So what we're doing is we're gathering all the different clients that are interested, getting them signed up, and then we're going to look at, as a whole, purchasing in bulk. Typically, we purchase in 5 to 10 megawatts, so that allows a business owner, maybe that's only getting 100 kilowatts, gets the benefit of group buying power because we're going to buy everything all at the same time. And that's what really is benefit to this program. Volume installations help control costs of doing business. The best return on investment available, mainly because some of these programs are ending. Many payment options to suit your needs. Some businesses want to take full advantage of the programs and benefits without interest rates, and they purchase it. They purchase the system outright, and they get all the advantages themselves. Financing it, there's definitely some options to finance where businesses can either do an equity line, or they can do the Green Bank program, or the GreenWorks lending program, which is CPACE, where that's 100% financing. One of the benefits of that is that they don't have to worry about putting any money down, but they can still own the system. And solar saves money and saves the environment, which is the whole goal here. So we use state-of-the-art design tools in order to do a satellite imagery and show what can fit on the roof. And then we go out and visit the site, and we dial that in a little bit more with an on-site measurement. Here's an example of a system, a pretty complicated system on a school. But as you can see, we take everything into account. We use all viable roofs and try to maximize system sizes and benefits based on the design. Now, to talk a little bit more about the solar program options, the purchase is a prepay your power, get the highest return on investment. The way I look at it is if you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on a solar system, you're going to spend that much money over time anyway on electricity. So a lot of businesses say, hey, if I'm going to spend this amount of money over 20 years, why don't I just spend less up front, and now I have the power covered for a certain amount of time, and there's a cost and payback to that. CPACE financing that I mentioned before, it's basically a property assessed financing, which means that it doesn't necessarily act as a loan. It actually is attached to the property. So what's nice about that is that just like getting a sewage bill, CPACE actually attaches the payment for the solar system or other energy improvements as well into the tax bill, and that way if the property gets sold, that liability goes with the property, not with the business owner. That's actually very important to a lot of small businesses that need to keep cash flow or need to keep equity lines open. Many small businesses need to have access to capital very quickly for supply, for payroll, for things like that. So this allows them to do solar, get savings, but not affect their credit lines. And then the power purchase agreement is the last option, where a third party, like the Green Bank, would actually own the system. And this is very common for municipalities, is where the municipality might be spending a certain amount of money on power, and they don't have to buy the system. What happens is the Green Bank buys the system. They pay us to install it, whether we contract with the Green Bank or contract with a business directly, we charge the same amount of money. It doesn't matter to us. But the financing mechanism is that the Green Bank would own the power. They would monetize a tax credit, since a municipality usually can't. Nonprofits, same thing. Schools, such as Yale University we're working with right now, they're not monetizing the tax credit, so they're doing a PPA, same thing. And in return, what you get is a system that has no risk because you don't own it, no maintenance because the maintenance is covered by the owner, and you get a reduced electric bill. So if, let's just say you were spending 12 cents per kilowatt hour from the utility, you might get a PPA rate of 9 cents. So that's a 3-cent savings, which doesn't sound like a lot, but you add that up over time and it can be tens of thousands of dollars per year in savings, which essentially goes right back into the budget of the town or the school or the nonprofit. Any questions about this before we move on?
I do. So you mentioned, Mr. Wall mentioned that you have approximately 100 municipalities out of 170 in the state. Is there a way that we can find out, is there a list of those municipalities and the savings that they've realized over time?
We can provide a list of the towns. I don't know if they have the data readily available, but we can provide some information that we've compiled through the studies.
And I think Green Bank is very willing to share that information too. So we've done some schools. We've had schools we've done a long time ago and schools we've done recently. And Green Bank compiles all that information. And if you were to work with Green Bank to try to do a PPA for the town, I think they'd be more than happy to share that information with you. So about CPACE and GreenWorks Lending. GreenWorks Lending was started from a former employee of the Green Bank. So the Green Bank basically offers financing and programs to Connecticut homeowners and commercial property owners. And the CPACE program is actually, the PACE program is actually going around the country because it's a very popular program to allow businesses and residences to go ahead and take advantage of energy efficiency and solar. In Connecticut, it's only available to commercial properties. However, GreenWorks Lending is located in Connecticut and actually has helped with a few of our projects recently. And CPACE is a financing structure made possible by a state-level policy that has been passed in over 30 states. The policy classifies as building energy improvement upgrades as a public benefit. So as I mentioned, it's like a sewer or road extension, and it allows for repayment through a specialty property tax assessment. And that means that the town, so if a business in North Branford wanted to do the CPACE program, the town would actually be part of that because they would be essentially passing the payment through the tax assessment. Connecticut Green Bank gave property owners access to a new form of financing for building upgrades and what I had talked about previously. And as you can see, many towns all over the state are participating in this. And it looks like North Branford is one of them. Yes. So the nice part about this program, if you went ahead to get an equity line or construction financing, typically the max you can do is about 80%. So the business owner would still have to come up with 20% deposit to do a system. And imagine a very large system, if it's $1 million, might have to do a $200,000 deposit. Well, that's a big chunk of money to put up if you don't want to have to affect your cash flow. So the cash flow is really the biggest reason people use CPACE, because you can do 100% financing. It's a long payback period. They do 20 years, but they'll actually even knock it down and do different levels as well. And it's a fixed rate, so you know exactly what that payment's going to be for the full 20 years, and it's always going to be less than what you're getting in energy savings and ZREC value. Covers all the hard and soft costs, meaning if we were to go out there and the business needed to do a new roof, or they needed to do maybe an electrical service upgrade. Sometimes there's things that we need to do in order to put the solar on. Sometimes it's re-seaming the roof, maybe not a new roof, but just some maintenance. That can all be rolled into that same loan. And in that case, the owner does keep the federal tax credit, and they keep the tax benefits, and they keep the ZREC. So even though they're 100% financing it, no money down, what's different than this in the PPA is they actually do own the system at the end, and they keep all the benefits. The flexible part is there's no personable or corporate guarantee. As I mentioned, this is part of the property, so it's attached to the property. The transfer is very easy. If somebody can get approved for a mortgage on the property, they can definitely get approved to transfer this over to them. And why wouldn't they want to? I get this question a lot as well, what if I can't sell the property? Well, you're gonna show them a payment that they're making that's far less than what they'd be spending with the utility. So if you could move into 2 different buildings, and one building has a 20-25% savings on the utility and the other building doesn't, why wouldn't you want the one that has a 20-25% savings? And the cost can be passed through the tenants. So sometimes building owners have many tenants, and a lot of times if they've already done sub-metering and they're currently sub-metering to other tenants now, they continue to do that. So even though they're getting the benefits, they bought the system, they could still end up getting sub-metering benefits through each one of those particular units that's already spending the money with them as well, as long as you're not charging higher than the actual rates. And as I mentioned before, it preserves the borrowing capacity of the business. So easy to qualify, it's usually based on property value. That's the main thing. So they're gonna look at the cost of the solar system. Obviously, they're not gonna put $1 million solar system on a $100,000 property. So that's how it's basically gauged to make sure that the value of the solar system isn't way higher than the value of the property. Funds most energy and water projects and all standard commercial property types. I don't see the graph on that one. So typically the payback periods match the equipment life. In other words, when this is all paid off, the system still has benefits. So 25 years is really the warranty of the panels. And now inverters are even getting to a 25-year warranty. So if you have it paid off in 20, which you're really paying it off with the savings, you're not coming out of pocket at all, you then still have benefit after it's completely paid off because you've got no payment to anyone and you still own the system.
Do the panels like lose their effectiveness, efficiency?
Yeah, so there's actually built into all our cash flows is a 0.5% degradation per year. And what that means is that if a system is producing 100,000 kilowatt hours in year 1, it only produce a 0.5% less the following year. So it wouldn't lose 1,000 kilowatt hours, only use 500. So 99,500 kilowatt hours would have produced next year. And that's actually laid out in a cash flow chart. But the majority of panels now, the only ones that we use, have a 25-year production guarantee. And that means that they have to produce at least 80% of what they did on day 1 in year 25. So you're actually only losing 20% over the course of 25 years. And that's a number that the manufacturers aren't going to let you hit because then they have to replace panels. So if they say it's 80%, most likely it's 85 to 87. And really the most modules, most solar panels actually don't degrade in the first couple years. The panels get taken out of the box and they have called what's light-induced degradation. Just the first time they see the light, they degrade a little bit. And then after that, you put the panels on, and for the first 3 years or so, you don't really see any drop-off. And then you'll see about a 0.5% after that per year.
How is that monitored? Like, can you go up there in 10 years and do a study and find out if you're losing efficiency at that rate?
That's a great question. So in order for any warranty claims, you have to have monitoring. So we used to go up to the roofs and do actually measure each panel with little heat guns, but that's very time consuming. So now all the panels we have, all the systems we have computer monitoring. So the computer monitoring actually tells us what everything is producing. So on our roof, because of 2017 National Electric Code, Connecticut is now adopting finally in October, which is required, what's called rapid shutdown. So it's required that every module up on the roof has a way to get shut down for emergencies. So now what we do is we put a little device in the back of every single panel, and the nice part is that actually allows us to have module level monitoring. What we do for many schools is we install a kiosk. So you put a TV up in the school, it shows live what the system is actually producing. And that's of course for educational benefit, but also it's logging all that data. So at any time if a panel stops working, we would get an alert. And you can get an alert as well. Whoever the owner of the system wants an alert, because if a panel stops working, we want to know why, and then be able to replace that, and that's all covered under warranty. However, just like you said, being able to know how much power is being produced over time is important. And you'll be able to see if one panel is not producing as much as the ones next to it, then we go out and we test that one panel. Imagine if you had 2,000 panels on a roof, to try to figure out where that one panel is without computer monitoring can take years. So the computer monitoring tells us real time, we go out, we test it. The nice part about these little devices on the back of the panels called optimizers is if one panel stops working, the rest of the panels around it keep working. So it's not going to shut down the whole system because of that. And we can live find out what the problem with the panel is. Sometimes it's just a lemon. Maybe it was a panel that's not producing as much. Maybe the panel was hit by something. Maybe there's something got dislodged when, you know, one of the facilities guys was up there sweeping off the roof or something, and, you know, we could just go up there and reattach it. So, but yeah, computer monitoring is very important, mainly because there's two sides to this. The savings is important. If it's not producing enough, you're not getting enough savings. But also the ZREC is based on production. So if the production goes down, the ZREC goes down. So we always want to monitor and make sure it's producing exactly at high efficiency, because that maximizes the revenue of the system as well.
Excuse me. Are they affected by, say, dust or something? I mean, you have a whole array of panels and you're near a field and, you know, they keep going by and dust and dirt and stuff accumulate on them. Do they lose efficiency? Do they have to be cleaned or?
Yeah, so modules typically, if they're on an angle, get cleaned by the rain. Okay. I do have a system, actually right now, we just installed at Brewport in Bridgeport, right by the highway. And within the first week, because we installed them in the wintertime, you saw salt spray all over the panels. So we recommended you go out with a power washer and power wash those off. So in certain situations, like when you're next to a highway in the winter, plowing, you know, it's literally right next to the highway, so that happens. And typically an operation and maintenance plan is what we recommend. If your basic soiling is already accounted for. So in other words, if you do nothing to the panels, we've already accounted for that in the production. However, on O&M plans or operation and maintenance, especially if you don't own it, typically if it's high soiling, we go out there and the panels are obviously really dusty and it's not producing what it should, we would just wash them off. But for the most part, you know, the particles of dirt aren't really going to stop the panel from producing, because the solar cell is actually underneath the glass. So the particles might sit on top of the glass, but the sun still gets through to the solar module underneath. One thing to consider is snow. Since you asked that question, sometimes you go by and you see panels completely covered in snow. Well, if they're covered in snow, they're not producing power, okay? However, again, we accounted for that. So in our assessment of solar panels, we have to do what are called PV-SYS reports. And what that means is we go on site, we take what are called solmetric sun-eye reports, which are just basically snapshots in time of what the whole sky looks like. And that would mean tree obstructions. That would mean obstructions on the roof. Anything that could be up there that would obstruct the panels from producing power. That's all put into report, and then we add into that about 40 days of snow. We add into that soiling. So the production number that we give you is based on assuming all those things are going to happen. So if we take the same system and we put the same system in Florida, and the system in Florida is not getting any snow, it's really not getting much winter at all, that same system is going to produce a lot more in Florida than it would in Connecticut, because we have to take into account the snow loads. Sure. Right. But I don't recommend going out and clearing the panels, because what happens is the snow covers the panels for a couple days, then there's always some sun that comes out. Even on a cold day, the sun will actually melt the snow off the panels. And then typically it falls between the rows, and it eventually just, you know, dissipates and melts and goes right into the regular gutter system that's already there. Correct. Now, one thing to mention about that, we do have to get a structural analysis on all buildings. I'm sure years ago people remember the big storm that some roofs were caving in, because those roofs were not built for snow load. So we make sure that not only can it hold the weight of the panels, but if the weight of the panels is also holding the weight of the snow on top of that, we have to make sure that it can handle all that weight. And that's done in a full structural analysis. So the day one payback that's been up here for a little bit, just want to quickly talk about it, is if you paid cash, you got a $2 million is actually this one, you'd have to pay upfront $2 million. On a bank loan, 15 to 20% as I mentioned. On a PACE assessment, $0 upfront, okay? So overall, you're gonna be cash flow positive in the first year because you didn't put out any money at all. And the other systems, and we always talk about this, because in solar, I don't want to put solar on a building that's inefficient. Okay, a lot of times if we know somebody's going to be doing energy efficient upgrades, sometimes we'll downsize the system. So we'll talk to the energy consultant and they say, okay, we're going to upgrade all their HVAC units. We're going to go ahead and change out the chillers. We're going to be putting in new insulated roof. We're going to be doing certain things to decrease their load. So if we know that they're going to be decreasing their load by 15%, then we design the solar to 15% under their current usage. And that's important because efficiency and renewables is great together. So we don't want to just go ahead and put as many solar panels as we can on a building that could be upgraded in other ways. So maybe our solar system would be a little bit smaller, but they can also reduce their footprint as well. And the other energy saving measures or efficiency measures that can be put into the CPACE program are as follows. There's LED lighting, there's the building envelope or the roof, high efficiency HVAC boilers and chillers, automated building controls, which is essentially demand response type controls, water conservation, variable speed drives, and associated soft costs, as I mentioned before. So what's next? The big thing is submitting your usage in your bill. In order to design a solar system, we need the usage. And also the bill. There's a lot of, even though everybody's in North Branford might be, well, not everybody, some are in Wallingford Public Power, I found out, but the ones that are in UI, be amazed at how one UI bill might look different than the one next door. So we can't just say, as in like we do in residential, that we know exactly what the rate is, because some businesses have supplier agreements. Some businesses are on different rate plans. So there's different types of rate plans. You could be on a rate plan that does on-peak and off-peak kilowatt hours, which can fluctuate the rates. So we have to take a look at that and find out what your actual offset of electricity will be as far as savings. And then we also need to know the yearly kilowatt hour usage. If you're producing 200,000 kilowatt hours, that's a different size system than if you're producing 1 million kilowatt hours. So that's really the first step, is a bill helps us determine what we think we can fit on the roof. We typically then do a pre-design right away, so because we want to see if it's viable. If there's too many obstructions on the roof, we might not be able to do a solar system big enough to make sense. So we wouldn't want to waste anybody's time. And we do that right away. We'll do that initial pre-design without even coming out. And then if the pre-design looks like we can fit enough power, then we set a site survey. And the site walk is to look at the main electric panel, make sure that the current service can accept the solar without any upgrades. Doesn't mean we can't do it if it doesn't need upgrades, but that's a very, very important part of this to make sure that we know, can we tie into your existing service, or do we need to do a line side tap, or we need to upgrade your service maybe? Which is all fine, we can do that in the total cost of the project, but that's a very important part to pricing it. And then we walk the roof. We want to see what the height of the obstructions are. So even though from satellite you can see that there's some obstructions, maybe you're not sure if they're 4 feet or 6 feet, and that's important to know because we don't want to put panels too close to obstructions or else they're going to get shaded. So that's what the site walk is for. And then once that's done, we go ahead and we finalize the proposal, give you a bunch of options based on our site walk and the needs of the property owner, and then you apply for the RECs. So applying for the RECs is probably the most important thing on this whole process, and I'll explain that to you because we are now entering year 8 of ZREC. There is no program after that right now. So after year 8, the utilities have no plan to do another ZREC program. So if building owners want to at least be prepared to do solar, whether they decide to sign up or not, get the initial assessment, and if you think that you might be leaning towards it, apply for the ZREC. It doesn't cost a dime to apply for the ZREC, and it's something we can help businesses with. And that way, at least the incentive is secured while you're trying to figure out how to finance the project, while you're figuring out which way you want to go. But that ZREC is really important because without that, this program doesn't work. So I do stress that that's opening in April. So if there's anybody that's interested in getting an assessment, reach out to us right away and get us your bill so we can do an assessment on your property. And thank you very much. We appreciate your time.
Yeah, so you're looking at this whole zone coming in through Route 80 and all that. Does each system have to be associated to each business? In other words, for the sake of argument, say you put solar collectors on the school and they could do 400% of what the school's using. Could you only do 100 at the school and you can't use that other 300 to offset all these other places?
Yeah, great question. The utility, right now, how the rules work is they do not want you sizing higher than the load on site. Now, unless you do a virtual net metering program, but that usually wouldn't be for behind the meter. That would be for a landfill or for, a completely in front of the meter project, which would be a little bit different than the program we're talking about.
Yeah, it's interesting, because you say a landfill that doesn't use any power.
Right, and that's where I go back to that solar farm that we have.
Yeah,
That this guy in Thompson is not using all that power.
right.
There actually is no on-site load. We had to bring in a new service just to throw that power back into the grid, but then that power is sold elsewhere. Now that is a different program that I could talk to the town about, but right now it's not open. However, we think it might open. So if there's any sites on the town that you might say, hey, we have space that we're not using, and it would make sense to see what the value could be, because not only is there an income, so you can lease the space just like you'd lease anywhere else, but then there's the power savings on top of that, which the town could then apply to other buildings. The reason the virtual net metering program is so great for municipalities is, like you mentioned, there's a lot of buildings
Right.
that maybe don't have the space or don't have the ability to do solar, but they still have a big need, right? So you can't just put solar on another building and somehow tie it into the other one across the way, but you can do a virtual net metering project where the town, basically agrees to develop a certain area, and then they get the benefit, and then you can just send that power to certain accounts. So.
Fast forward 25 years, like I said, the system's paid for, and whatever, they're running at 80, 60%. What, in 25 years, is it anticipated the technology will change and you're just going to come out and put new panels on? Is that you as the owner have to buy a whole new system at that point, or what happens to these things after 20, 25 years?
It's a good question. A watt is a watt. So if it's producing power, it's offsetting kilowatt hours.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe only 80%, right?
Right.
In 25 years. But if it's already paid for, and let's just go over the purchase scenario, right? The building owner, if you purchase a system, most likely gets a payback where they recoup all the costs of the system within 4 to 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
So in 25 years, they've paid back the system probably sevenfold, okay?
Right.
So the system's already paid for, it's already producing power, and it's still saving them money. So the question being is, at what point do you not value that power savings anymore?
Or at what point is it a maintenance issue, because now you have to
Correct.
go under the roof, or the things just
Correct. So what we tell a lot of folks is two things. One is, if it's still saving money, why take it off?
Right.
However, all the infrastructure is there. All the wiring is there. All the racking is there. If there's a 1,000-watt panel in the future,
Sure.
it's very small, this big,
Right.
which could happen. I mean, and those panels are degrading and they're 80%, 60%. There's a choice at which you say, okay, why don't we take all the panels off and put the newer panels on? But the newer panels, all they do is they produce more power with less square footage. So you might not need as much as your roof. Maybe you take off half the racking and put on some new panels, and now you have another 25 years. I don't know, maybe those panels are warranted for 1,000 years at that time.
Right.
Who knows? The other side of it is, as a municipality, if you do solar on your roof, okay, and you're not buying the system, the Green Bank owns it, you're just doing a PPA for it. After the 20 years, there's a decommissioning plan put into place, where the 20-year period is over. You got your savings, you're very happy, but maybe there's new technology. You have the right to say, okay, take it off our roof. And that decommissioning plan includes essentially restoring to original. So they have to remove everything. If there's any holes, they have to repair them. So it leaves it as if it was day one again. But there's also other options. After the 20-year period, decommissioning, 100%, take it off, no problem. But they might say, hey, it's 20 years, the panels are warranted for 25, would you like to re-up for 5 years? And that rate can be renegotiated at that time.
Piggybacking on Scott's question, is there any installations that have met that 25 years in your experience so far that have actually gone to that next step? Or is it all just kind of theoretical at this point?
I don't think there's been, the federal income tax credit started in 2009. So I think that the first systems that are going to get to 20 years are going to be probably in 2029.
Okay.
The big part though is we do a lot of utility scale type projects, big ones, and a lot of the towns are asking these questions as far as, hey, what happens to all this equipment, you know? There's already a recyclable market starting. There's some companies that are actually looking to buy these, to basically come in, take it all off for you because of the scrap metal value. And because the panels are glass and silicon, that can be taken apart and reused as well. So we would hope that we're not taking all this, you know, all this great equipment that's helping the environment. We're not just going to take it off and put it in a junkyard. The whole goal is that all these materials get reused. However, the infrastructure is going to be there. We're not going to basically, you know, rip out all the wires and take everything out. So we're just going to take the infrastructure, well, the panels and the inverters and the racking probably down, but you still have an upgraded system that's ready for the next system. So,
Second question, if I look at your house in front of you there, if theoretically there was a fire right where the word thank is and you had to ventilate the roof, typically we would cut a hole in the roof for ventilation purposes. How would that roof being loaded with solar panels impact that?
So fire code doesn't allow us to put solar panels on both sides of a roof like that.
Right.
Because the attic typically stretches under both roofs and you're only covering the south side. So fire departments are fine with us putting solar up completely on one side of the roof because they would just ventilate from the opposite side. Now the other thing is there is setback requirements to allow firefighters to safely access. Right. But the first thing that they would do if there's a fire and they go out to a house that has solar is they're going to run over and they're going to pop the meter. And what that does is it actually shuts down the system completely.
Right.
Now the old way of doing it, when I had mentioned that they used to have just straight string inverters, or these devices that are in the main electric panel or in the main electric room, but there's nothing on top of the roof. If they went ahead and de-energized or popped the meter out, the panels would still be active, and they would be sending DC power down all the way to the inverter, even though it's not being inverted. And that's actually a danger to firefighters. So what we do now is what I had mentioned is we put optimizers on the back of every single panel. So when you pop that meter, it actually de-energizes all the way back to the panels. So even that conduit is safe for firefighters. It gets down to below a volt. Because if they see that it's an AC line, not a DC line, they'll go ahead and put their axe right through it. But a DC line can be very high voltage, and that's not safe. But yes, we actually have to go to building permit for every single project, and the towns look at that and make sure that there is accessibility for fire. Typically when you have the residential roofs though, it's usually not an issue, only because they have another side to access. Now if there's no attic inside there, that's different. Those houses, they may require us to put more of a setback, leaves room at the top, but that's all town specific. So there is a code, however everybody interprets the code a little differently. So, any other questions?
Okay, I just would like to share an example. I live in a town called Essex, and Essex, we're very much into the Sustainable Connecticut program. In fact, I'm co-chair of the committee of that. And we have converted every municipal property into solar in Essex. And the past year, the savings were 26% from like a base of 5 years back. So it's been very impressive. And we now have almost 16% of all the residents that have now installed solar in some place. So it's been a big savings, and as a consequence, our tax rates have gone down. So, you know, it's an interesting using solar to offset the cost of running a community, and in turn passing that back and making it a more attractive community for businesses to move into. Obviously, we struggle with the high rates of UI. We're competing with the guys up the road in Wallingford, and one of our local manufacturers called Engineering Specialities, you may know them, right here in North Branford, have installed solar across the top of their manufacturing space, and now are meeting 65% of their total power requirements from their solar installations. So they are big advocates of that. So I guess our next question is, where do we go from here? Do we come back through Bob if we can take some of this material that you're offering to share with us? We'd like to do some one-on-ones with some specific manufacturers and businesses in the community.
Sure, yeah, we can share this presentation with you, no problem. And I think that the main thing is there's no one size fits all for solar.
Right.
Obviously, if you've done a lot of the schools, you know, every single one's unique. So the same thing here is if you're talking to business owners that are interested, you make the initial contact and they want to have more information, we can then look at their bill and come out and do an assessment for them.
Great, okay.
And wanted to add that there is a website, solarizenorthbranford.green.
Okay.
Jeff, do you have your contact information on a slide? Or?
I don't think I have it on here, no.
All right, we can provide Jeff's information.
Okay.
He will coordinate with any business or commercial property that's interested in solar, and the company will also work with residents that are interested.
Great. Well, thanks again. This is a great presentation. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Roger, did Essex lease, buy, or
Great job.
is it all different?
The town did, the private residents make their own decisions.
Right.
The town is